Okay, so we are going to assemble the skirt together. We're going to sew the skirt front to the skirt back pieces, and the whole thing's going to come together quite beautifully. We've already done the darts. They're perfectly in place. This is the skirt front. So we just need to sew the pieces together. So again, I'm going to sew good to good, good side to good side. So this is the good side, right? This is the back side, the wrong side, because this is the side that has the seam allowance, right? The little flappy excess pieces. So this is the good side, the outside, that will look really nice and crisp from the outside. So I'm going to take one of my back pieces, right? And this is also the good side of the back piece. And I'm going to match it up with my front piece. So the back piece has a single notch a few inches down on the hip, just like the front piece does on both sides. So that's how I know where to match it up. So again, I'm taking good to good, right? This is my good side, and this is my good side. I'm placing them together, and then I am looking to see, there they are, that these two notches match up, which they do. So that's the first place I'm going to pin. Notches are places that you've given yourself so that you can match up your pieces. So I'm putting a pin just beside that notch, right? Because it's kind of got a little slit in it, so I don't want to go right through it, but just beside that notch. And then I'm going to make sure I'm placing these two pieces perfectly together, following that slight curve of the hip all the way up to the top. And I'm pinning it like every few inches. As many pins as you want. Go to town with pins, as long as it doesn't move, okay? And then I'm gonna pin all the way down on this side. I've gotta basically line this up flawlessly all the way down. And I don't want even a tiny 1/16 of an inch, more on one side than the other. I want them to be exactly pinned at exactly the same spot, just like when we did all of our practice seams, okay? So all the way down. Sometimes what happens, see how when I get to the end, look, this side's a little longer. It's not the worst case scenario if that happens down at the hem. You wouldn't want that to happen up at the top where the fit is, right? So it's a little tiny bit. I mean, it's about like 1/8 of an inch over. So if anything, if it's going to be a little bit off, I'd rather it be down there at the hem of the skirt where we can easily make a slight adjustment, okay? But now I've got this pinned all the way down. And now I can sew this at 1/2 of an inch. And again, I've got my good side touching my good side so that all of my ugly seam allowance will all be on the same side, okay? And we're gonna sew this 1/2 of an inch all the way down. Super simple. And again, on your machine, that's gonna be your 4/8. So you come about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And again, I'm holding on to those threads. I'm walking the first few stitches, pull this pin out, and see if I can sew this long seam. When you get to the pins, you can pull those out. And this is a slight curve around the hip. So make sure you're following the line exactly. It's really slight, so it's easy to miss. Pull these pins out as I go so I don't break anything. From here on out, it should be pretty straight as you do the rest of your skirt, just a very straight seam, pretty straightforward. The only daunting thing is that this is a little longer than other seams you've sewn. But otherwise, it's very easy, straight seam. Okay, and we'll go almost to the end, and then just go right off the edge. Okay, so here's my seam, 1/2 inch all the way down. And I can just make sure there's no tension, no gathering that's caught anywhere by sort of pushing that tension all the way down. And again, you can see it's just an ever so slight curve here up at the hip. And what I'll do is I'll tie off both of these sides with a little double knot, just so they don't unravel while we're working, but that if we need to pull them out because something went wrong, we can easily. Okay, and then the next step we would do is to press the seam open. So here's the outside. Here is my hip, and again, you could see right away it starts to make a curve. It starts to make a curved shape on that slightly curved seam that we sewed. So we want to press this open, press the seam allowance open, right, like this, all the way down. It could be a little more difficult on this curved edge to be able to press it completely open, because basically it's a rounded shape now that's happening. If you need to, you could give yourself a few clips in the seam allowance. See how I did that? I'm just clipping not all the way down, but close to within 1/4 of an inch. This will make it actually a little easier for you to press this flat because it takes some of the tension off of this curved shape, okay? So I'm gonna go over to the iron and see if I can show you. And to make it easy on myself, I usually start with the straight side when I'm pressing, because this one will be really easy to just press open, right? And then you can slowly work your way up to the curved hip area. Okay, so I'm just pushing those seams open where it naturally wants to go. Okay, and since I've clipped it in a few places, it'll try to move on you a little bit. Now hit this, oops, from this side. And I'm just going to press these open just like that. Okay, if you can kind of see, just pressing the seam allowance gently, completely flat open. Okay, so once you, oops, I got some wrinkles, and this happens too, so make sure, see, I just accidentally pressed in a few wrinkles. If that happens, that's when you can spritz your water from your steam iron, spritz it on there, and then you can work that wrinkle right back out. Okay, so then you definitely want to hit this now from the outside one more time to make sure that it looks good from this side and that you haven't accidentally got any folds in there that you didn't mean to. And again, see how I can lift the fabric up. This is now a round 3-dimensional piece. It's going to wrap around some hips, so you might have to lift it up. But this is what you'll have. Okay, so it's pressed totally flat, open, all the way nice and smooth. Okay, so now you've got one side down, and you can do the same thing with the other side. So again, we've got, here's my good side, and here's my good side of my other back piece. And I'm going to look to see that these two notches can match up, which they can. So that's good. You'll know right away if your notches don't match up that you've done something wrong, that maybe you've put your dart on the wrong side. And in that case, you'll have to take out the dart and start over and put it on the right side. So again, I start with my notch. That's my point that I want to make sure lines up, usually placed in a point of fit right around the hips. And then I'm going to pin from there. So look how even like these two pieces are trying not to match up. You've got to tell the fabric what to do. You've got to make sure those two pieces of fabric line up. Sometimes it tries to do its own thing. There's this balance of letting the fabric do what it's telling you to do, but also completely controlling it. Make sure that you're controlling the fabric and it's not controlling you. And then I'm gonna pin all the way down. Again, making sure that it's matched up all the way down. And then I'll sew this seam all the way down. And then I'll press it open. Okay, so there we go. Now we sew this at a 1/2 inch, just like we did the other one. So once you've got your two side seams sewn up, you've got this huge, giant, sort of like wrap skirt. And the next step is that we're gonna do the center back seam. And remember, we can find the center back seam because of the double notches. So we're gonna make sure that we're folding our skirt good side to good side. Okay, and that we're matching up our double notches, and we're going to do that center back seam. So we'll go ahead and pin right here at this double notch, and then we'll pin all the way straight down to do this center seam. And this is the seam where we're going to have the zipper. And so just like when we sewed the zipper for our sample, we sewed a tiny seam at the bottom, or a shorter seam, and then the rest of the seam had the zipper in it. So we are only going to sew from the bottom up to here, up to our second part of the double notch. We're going to sew to there. So this portion at the top, we're going to leave open because that's where the zipper is going to go. Okay? So we'll sew this part first, just at 1/2 inch. Again, starting right there at the top of that double notch. All the way down, and we'll pull out our pins, and so this is what we'll have. We'll have our 1/2 inch sewn all the way to here. And what I'm going to do is definitely want to tie this off into a knot because we're going to put our zipper in and we don't want it to unravel. And let's pull this 2 threads to one side. So see how I did that? You can get a little loop. If you can't get it with your finger, you can use a pin. So I'm just going to tie this in a double or triple knot. Don't want to add any tension, but I just want to secure that from unraveling. And now I'm going to press this seam open, and just like we did for the sample, I'm also going to press open the 1/2 inch from here to the top where our zipper is going to live. You can mark this out if you want to. You can take your ruler and bring it, 1/2 inch from the edge and mark with your chalk exactly where to turn so that's easier for you to find that exact 1/2 inch, whatever makes it easy for you. So I'll come over to the ironing board, and I'm going to press this long seam all the way. And then when I get up to the top, again, I can just continue it, or I can go ahead and measure and mark it. But I'm going to press that 1/2 inch all the way up to the top. so that I can set up my zipper there. And I kind of move this a little further down. I feel like I've got a good 1/2 inch on one side, but it's a little shy on this side, so let me just move that over and fix it. There we go. And I can shoot it with a little steam and make sure it listens to me. But this is what I want. See, I've got my seam pressed open, and then the remainder of the seam allowance is pressed open at a 1/2 inch as well. And so once I've got that done, now's the time I can flip this to the right side. Okay, so we've got the outside of our skirt. And again, here is our beautiful back seam. We could see our seam stops right there, and we've still pressed it so that it's ready to set up our zipper. And so I've got my 9-inch zipper, and it's going to go in this space here. So again, here is where, get this ready so you can see it. Here's where my sewing ends. This is pressed and ready for me to set up the centered zipper. I'm going to take the edge of the zipper tape and put it right at the top here so that it lines up. And you're just going to position this underneath the center just like we did our centered zipper sample, okay? And my goal is that the zipper teeth are right in the center of my opening, and that my seams end up kissing, that these two seams end up meeting. And then what I really want to make sure doesn't happen is that I get some kind of weird like bump in the fabric right here, which often happens when you're putting in a zipper, because this is going over the hips and basically this is going right down the center of your butt. That would be the last place you'd want some weird bump in the fabric. You really want this to be smooth and solid. So especially in the back of a skirt or the back of a dress, you want that zipper to be put in really flawlessly. So I might even like pay special attention to kind of setting up right down here. This is also a difference because for the first time when I'm pinning, I'm not just going through this layer of fabric, but I've got my front of the skirt in here as well. So when I'm pinning, I want to make sure I slide my hand in and that I'm not also getting the front of the skirt fabric, okay? So it's going to seem a little more cumbersome than the way we set it up before, but doable. It's really just about like getting it just right. So I'm just gonna pin both sides and again, sliding in my hand just to make sure I haven't gone through the front of the fabric. And I'll probably do each side at the same time. Really make sure it's in there nicely. And again, I'm looking for really nice, smooth, no bumps, and that I'm centering these teeth right in the center of the zipper opening. So take your time, pin this thoughtfully, and then after this, I'll do a hand baste to also make sure it's locked in place. And then you could always test and see, okay, is it opening nicely and I didn't catch the front of my skirt anywhere? Definitely want to make sure that happens. Okay, so once it's all set up, just like we did for our sample zipper, looking good, nice and smooth, we're kissing, we're meeting, and then I can do a hand baste before I go ahead and sew this in finally. Okay, so I've got this all hand basted on both sides, and what you could do is check it to make sure that it opens, that you haven't caught anything in the front or anywhere else inside the skirt, that it looks nice, that it looks even, that it looks like what you want. If it's hand basted in place, it's pretty much going to stay this way when you sew it. You know, I could even already start to see it looks like right here I've got it a little more open than other places. So if I don't like the way that it looks, I could take out that bit of basting really quickly and just rebaste it to get it just how I like it. But I think it'll be good. So I can go now to the machine and see if I can get this sewn in. I've got a zipper foot already put on there. And again, we've got a difficult thing here. Oops, some of my basting's starting to come out already. If you need to, it's trying to come out on you, you could always leave a few pins in there as well until you get ready to sew. But what's going to happen is you've got to make sure now that you're not sewing through this bit. So what you could do right away to start is to open this, get that just right out of your way so that I can put one single layer where I need it to be in here. So I'm going to move that pin out because I'm just about to sew. And I'm going to place this again about, you know, 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And I've got the zipper foot so that I can come right down beside that zipper tape, okay? Getting really close. And I can walk those first few stitches, holding on to these threads, making sure that the stitches are going in there nicely. And I'm also making sure with my other hands that I'm putting my hand under here that I'm not catching any more of that skirt than I mean to. I'm just going to glide this along. And at any point when I'm ready to close my zipper, I can just put my needle down. Maybe I'll go a little further. Just go almost to my end here before I close my zipper. Okay, so my needle's down, and I'll have to kind of pick this back together and then pick my presser foot up, and I can close that zipper a little, okay? And again, I'm just kind of pulling on my basting stitches to make sure that they're staying where I want. And I'm making sure with my hand that I haven't caught the underside of my skirt as I'm sewing. So presser foot back down, and I'm going to sew until I hit the point where we stopped, which I can see with my pin, so I'm just putting my pin there so you can see, is right there. I'm going to pick that pin up out of the way, and just make sure that you're clearing that really large metal zipper stop. So my needle's down, I can pick my presser foot up and turn sideways to sew across the zipper. Okay, and I can do this 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 stitches. Okay, needles down, presser foot back up, and I'm going to turn all the way around to sew back up the other side. Okay, and my zipper is open. I could close it entirely, but maybe this gives me a little more room, so maybe I'll just leave it. Okay, needle down. I'll just go ahead and close that all the way. And again, every so often, just take your hand to make sure you haven't caught the rest of your skirt with this stitch. I'm going to sew till I get to the top, but because I am going to hit this again, let's go ahead and open it. So my needle's down, presser foot up. Ooh, let's see if I can, there we go, slide that through. Okay, so presser foot down, and let me just finish the rest of this seam. Okay, so needle up, presser foot up. Whew. Let's see how I did. So I've got my zipper in. Go ahead and close it. Let's see the big reveal. If I can pull out my basting stitch. Looks like I caught it on that side. Let me see if I can get this one. Sometimes I end up sewing over it a little bit. Go ahead and pick it out a little bit at a time. There we go. So one side gone, you can see that centered there. Oops. And let me see if I can get this out. Oh, sewed over it a little bit right there. There we go. Looks like I just caught it in one spot. Okay. And so there is my zipper. Looks maybe kissing pretty well. Kissing pretty well all the way down. Got a little crooked right there, but opens really nicely, nice and smooth. I sewed across right over where the opening of my zipper was, so that's going to lock that in place pretty nicely. And I could always give this a light press and see if I can get some of these little wrinkles out, see if that can look good. So basically my skirt is a skirt at this point. The next steps would be to add the waistband and do the hem.